Welcome to Nightmare Lullabies, where haunting tales meet soothing whispers. Close your eyes, embrace the dark, and let the story guide you into sleep. If you enjoy these stories, don't forget to like and subscribe. Join us for more haunting tales to lull you into sleep. My shift at the gas station on New Year's Eve was supposed to be uneventful. Just another quiet night with barely any cars on the highway and the occasional trucker stopping by for coffee. It was around 11:30 p.m. when I noticed the first sign of something off. A car I didn't recognize parked at the far end of the lot. At first, I thought someone might have broken down. I mean, why else would they sit there, engine off, headlights off? But when I looked closer, I could see a faint glow. The driver was still inside, lit by the screen of their phone. Nothing weird about that, I told myself. Maybe they're making a call or waiting for someone. I shrugged it off and went back to wiping down the counters. 10 minutes passed, then 15. The car hadn't moved. It was too far to see the license plate, but close enough that I could tell they were still there, still looking at their phone. Eventually, the door chimed as a man walked in. My heart did that thing where it jumps for no reason. He was average-looking, maybe mid-30s, wearing a plain jacket and jeans, but there was something about the way he walked. Slow, deliberate, like he wasn't in any rush. He didn't grab anything, didn't browse the shelves. He just came straight up to the counter and stared at me. "Quiet night?" he asked. I nodded, trying to sound casual. "Yeah, pretty quiet. Bet it gets lonely out here," he said, his voice low and calm. Too calm. I shrugged, forcing a smile. "Not really. Just another shift." He tilted his head slightly, like he was studying me. Then he leaned on the counter, just a little closer than I was comfortable with. "You working alone tonight?" That question sent a chill down my spine. I don't know why, but something about the way he said it felt wrong. My instinct kicked in, and I lied. "Nope, my manager's in the back," I said, gesturing toward the door behind me. His eyes flicked to the door, then back to me. He didn't say anything for a moment, just smiled. "Good to know." And just like that, he turned and walked out. I watched him cross the lot and get back into his car. He didn't leave. He just sat there, parked in the same spot, the faint glow of his phone lighting up his face. By then, my hands were shaking. I locked the doors and went to the back to pretend like I was busy, but I kept glancing at the security cameras. The car didn't move. Midnight came and went. Fireworks popped faintly in the distance, but my attention was glued to the monitor. It wasn't until almost 12:30 that the headlights finally clicked on, and the car pulled away. I didn't see the guy again, but I can't stop wondering what would have happened if I hadn't lied about someone being in the back. Sometimes I still think about his last words. Good to know. I wasn't planning on taking the shortcut. It was New Year's Eve, and the main road was quiet, but I was tired and figured cutting through the back roads would save me a good 15 minutes. Bad decision. It started fine, just the hum of my engine and the occasional streetlight breaking up the darkness. The shortcut wasn't much more than a long stretch of two-lane road, surrounded by trees on either side. No houses, no gas stations, no signs of life. About halfway through, I noticed headlights in my rearview mirror. Nothing unusual, right? But these lights weren't moving like a normal car's. They kept hanging back, then speeding up, getting closer, before falling behind again. At first, I thought it was some impatient driver messing around, so I slowed down a little to let them pass. But they didn't. They stayed right behind me, their headlights glaring into my mirrors. I decided to speed up, nothing crazy, just enough to create some distance. For a while it worked. The lights faded into the distance, and I started to relax. But then, just as I rounded a bend, the lights reappeared. This time they were right on me, closer than before. My heart started racing. What did they want? Why weren't they passing me? I tried to ignore it, focusing on the road ahead, but the lights swerved side to side, like the driver was trying to get my attention. I told myself not to panic, not to stop. Whatever they wanted, I wasn't about to find out. When I spotted a turnoff ahead, I made a split-second decision. I hit the brakes hard, turned sharply onto the smaller road, and killed my headlights. My car slid into the shadows as I waited, heart pounding, breath shallow. The other car screeched to a halt on the main road. Their headlights swept over the trees as they reversed, clearly searching for me. My fingers gripped the steering wheel so tightly they ached. After what felt like forever, they sped off, their lights disappearing into the distance. I waited another 10 minutes before starting my car again. When I finally got home, I sat in the driveway for a long time, staring at my hands. Whoever was in that car, they weren't just messing around. They wanted something, and I don't know what would have happened if I hadn't turned off the road when I did. I still drive that same route sometimes, but I've never taken that shortcut again. I don't care if it adds 15 minutes or an hour. There are some roads you don't take twice. I was running late that night, New Year's Eve, just after 11 p.m., and I still had another hour to drive before I'd get home. My phone's GPS said I was low on gas, so I pulled into the first station I could find, a small, dimly lit one just off the highway. The place was almost empty except for 2 cars parked on opposite sides of the lot. One was an old pickup with rusted panels, the other was a black SUV with tinted windows. No one else was inside. I got out and started filling up, the cold air biting at my hands. That's when I noticed it. The 2 drivers, one from the pickup, the other from the SUV, were standing near the far edge of the lot, talking in low voices. I couldn't hear what they were saying, but their body language was tense. The guy from the SUV kept glancing around, like he was nervous about being seen. I tried to mind my own business, but then one of them turned and looked straight at me. It wasn't a quick glance, it was a hard, deliberate stare, like he was sizing me up. I froze, pretending to check my phone, but my heart was pounding. The man said something to the other, then started walking toward me. "Hey," he called out, his tone friendly but forced. "Need any help there?" "No, I'm good. Thanks," I said quickly, not looking up. He stopped a few feet away, hands in his jacket pockets. "You heading far tonight?" That question sent chills down my spine. It was too specific, too personal. "Just a short drive," I lied. He nodded, but his eyes lingered on me a second too long before he turned back to the other guy. I finished pumping gas as fast as I could and got back in my car, locking the doors. My hands were shaking so bad it took me 2 tries to get the keys in the ignition. As I pulled out of the lot, I glanced in the rearview mirror. The pickup and the SUV hadn't moved, but the men were still standing there, watching me leave. I tried to shake it off, telling myself I was overreacting. But a few minutes later, I noticed headlights behind me. They weren't close, but they were there, just a pair of glowing dots in the darkness, following me. I took a few random turns, hoping it was just a coincidence, but the light stayed with me. My chest tightened as panic set in. Finally, I spotted a police station sign and turned sharply into the parking lot. The car following me slowed down for a moment, then sped off down the road. I never found out who they were or what they wanted, but I can't help thinking about how easily that night could have ended differently if I hadn't noticed them watching me. Sometimes being in the wrong place at the wrong time is all it takes. I'd been at a New Year's Eve party, and I'll admit, I wasn't in the best shape to drive home. It was almost 2 a.m., and I didn't want to bother any friends to come get me. So I did the next best thing. I ordered a ride through a rideshare app. The car pulled up in less than 5 minutes, a silver sedan with the little sticker in the window showing it was legit. The driver was an older guy, maybe in his late 50s, with a tired face and a baseball cap pulled low. "You're Cindy?" he asked, and I nodded. He didn't say anything else, just unlocked the doors. I climbed into the back seat and gave him a polite Happy New Year, but he didn't respond. Not even a smile. He just put the car in gear and pulled away from the curb. The silence was thick. Most drivers at least make small talk, but this guy? Nothing. I tried not to think much of it. Maybe he was tired, maybe he'd had a long night. Still, something felt off. The way he gripped the wheel so tightly, the way his eyes flicked to the rearview mirror every few seconds, like he was checking on me. A few minutes into the ride, I noticed we weren't on the route the app had shown me. I think you missed a turn," I said, leaning forward a little. "Shortcut," he muttered, without looking at me. Something about his tone made my stomach drop. I opened the app to check the GPS, but the signal was weak, and the screen wouldn't load. I glanced out the window, no streetlights, no houses. Just empty fields and a dark stretch of road ahead. "Where are we going?" I asked, my voice tighter this time. He didn't answer. "Hey," I said louder. "This isn't the way to my place." Still nothing. His hands stayed locked on the wheel, his eyes fixed on the road. My heart was racing now. I tried to think of what to do. My phone had barely any signal, and the idea of jumping out of a moving car at 60 miles per hour wasn't exactly appealing. "Look, just let me out here," I said, forcing my voice to sound steady. "I'll walk." Finally, he spoke. "It's not safe out here. Just relax." That's when I noticed something else. His phone wasn't mounted on the dash. In fact, it wasn't anywhere in sight. How was he even following the app's route? I knew I had to act fast. I leaned forward, pretending to adjust my shoe. and slid my hand toward the door handle. Before I could pull it, he slowed down. We came to a stop at a red light, the first I'd seen in miles. Without thinking, I yanked the door open and bolted. I ran to the nearest patch of light, a gas station about 100 yards away, my chest heaving. When I looked back, the car was gone. The next morning, I checked the app to report him, but the ride didn't show up. No record of it, no receipt, nothing. It was like I'd never gotten in that car. I don't know what his intentions were that night, but I'm glad I didn't stick around to find out. I was supposed to be at a New Year's Eve party with friends, but I wasn't feeling great, so I decided to head home early. It was just after 10 p.m. when I pulled into my driveway. The street was quiet. Most of the neighbors were probably out celebrating. As I walked up to my front door, I fished my keys out of my bag and went to unlock it. That's when I noticed something strange. The door was already locked, but from the inside. You see, I live alone, and I always leave it deadbolt when I go out. To lock it from the inside, someone would have had to be in my house. I froze. For a second, I thought maybe I was imagining things. Maybe I'd forgotten and locked it a different way, but my gut was telling me otherwise. I backed away from the door and stood on the porch, my breath visible in the cold air. I glanced around the yard. Nothing seemed out of place. No broken windows, no signs of forced entry. I thought about calling someone, but I didn't want to overreact. So, I did something I probably shouldn't have. I circled around to the back. The sliding glass door that leads into the kitchen was unlocked. That wasn't normal either. I never leave that door open. I slid it open as quietly as I could and stepped inside. The house was dark, except for the faint glow of the streetlights coming through the windows. "Hello," I called out, my voice shaky. "Nothing." I grabbed the heaviest thing I could find, a cast iron pan from the kitchen counter, and started moving through the house room by room. The living room was empty. So was the bathroom, the hallway closet, and the spare bedroom. I started to think maybe I'd been wrong. Maybe I had locked the door differently, maybe I'd forgotten about the slider. But then I got to my bedroom. The door was slightly ajar, just enough to see inside. My heart was pounding as I reached out and nudged it open. Everything looked normal at first glance. My bed was made. The lamp on my nightstand was right where I'd left it. But then I noticed something. My closet door was open, just a crack. It's an old closet, one of those ones with a sliding door that sticks if you don't pull it hard enough. And I knew for a fact I'd closed it that morning. I don't know how long I stood there, staring at that door frozen in place. It felt like hours. Finally, I worked up the nerve to reach out and pull it open. There was nothing inside. No one hiding, no signs that anyone had been there. I tried to convince myself that I'd imagined it all, but then I spotted something on the floor. A single muddy footprint, right in the middle of my bedroom carpet. I don't have an explanation for it, and I don't think I want one. But I'll tell you this, I don't live alone anymore. Not after that night. It was New Year's Eve, and I'd promised myself I'd start the new year with better habits. You know, eat healthier, exercise more, all that stuff. So, just after midnight, while everyone else was still celebrating, I laced up my running shoes and decided to go for a jog around my neighborhood. It was quiet outside, except for the occasional sound of fireworks in the distance. The streets were empty, and the only light came from the street lamps casting long, pale shadows on the pavement. At first, it was peaceful. The cold air was refreshing, and I felt good, like I was already making progress toward my resolution. But then I turned onto a stretch of road that runs along a small park. That's when I saw her. There was a woman jogging ahead of me, maybe 50 feet away. She was wearing a hoodie and running at a steady pace, her figure just barely visible under the dim streetlights. I didn't think much of it. It wasn't unusual to see someone else out for a late-night jog, especially on New Year's Eve. I kept my pace, figuring I'd pass her eventually. But no matter how fast I ran, I couldn't seem to close the distance. She stayed the same 50 feet ahead of me, her pace matching mine exactly. I sped up, pushing myself harder, but she sped up too, her movements eerily smooth and effortless. That's when I started to feel uneasy. I couldn't hear her footsteps, no sound of sneakers hitting the pavement. Just the soft rustle of my own breathing and the faint swish of my jacket. I slowed down, thinking I'd let her get farther ahead, but as soon as I did, she slowed down too. By now, my heart was racing. Not from the run, but from something I couldn't quite explain. I was about to call out to her, maybe ask if she was okay, but then she turned. Not fully, just enough for me to see her face in the glow of a nearby street lamp. She was smiling, but it wasn't a friendly smile. It was sharp, almost unnatural, like she was amused by something I couldn't see. Her eyes locked onto mine for just a second before she turned back and kept running. That was enough for me. I turned around and sprinted back the way I came, not stopping until I reached my driveway. I didn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her face, those eyes, that smile. The next morning, I told myself it was nothing, just my imagination playing tricks on me in the dark. But later that day, as I was scrolling through my neighborhood Facebook group, I saw a post that made my blood run cold. Does anyone know who the woman is that jogs the park at night? She doesn't respond when I try to say hi, and I've seen her following people. The comments were full of similar stories, people spotting her on different streets at odd hours, always jogging, always silent. I haven't been for a midnight jog since, and I doubt I ever will. Some resolutions just aren't worth keeping.